342. That's how many confirmed long-range eliminations Jake Turner logged as a Navy SEAL sniper before he traded his Barrett M82 for a John Deere tractor, becoming a single father running a struggling corn farm in Millbrook, Nebraska. When 6 escaped prisoners rolled onto his property, they saw what everyone else saw, just another desperate farmer about to lose his land to the bank. They should have noticed how he checked his fence line with military precision, spotted the way his eyes constantly tracked movement through the corn rows, even while discussing fertilizer prices at the general store. Their mistake wasn't targeting his farm. Their mistake wasn't even threatening his teenage son. Their mistake was giving a former SEAL Team 6 operator who eliminated high-value targets across 4 continents a reason to unlock the hidden room beneath his barn. In Millbrook, some fights aren't won by those with the most firepower, but by those who've spent 15 years learning to eliminate threats before they even know they're in the crosshairs. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Jake's morning routine never varied. Up before dawn, perimeter. Check disguised as a property walk. Satellite phone buried in his toolbox, checked for messages from former teammates. Old habits that kept him alive through 3 tours in Afghanistan and 2 in Iraq. Habits that would soon prove vital again. The bank had given him 30 days to make good on his payments. The drought had hit everyone hard, but Jake's smaller operation suffered more than the big corporate farms. He'd sunk his entire retirement pay into this place, chosen specifically for its tactical advantages. Multiple escape routes, clear sight lines to all approach vectors, natural choke points that could be easily defended. Even struggling to save his farm, he'd never stopped thinking like an operator. His son, Matt, had inherited his mother's sharp mind and his father's stubborn determination. At 17, he worked the farm with the same intensity Jake once brought to his missions. But he'd also inherited his mother's innocence, her belief in simple right and wrong. He didn't know about the hidden arsenal beneath the barn or why his father insisted on maintaining escape routes and emergency protocols. He just thought it was his dad being paranoid after too many deployments. Jake had chosen this quiet life to protect Matt from his violent past. But as he watched the morning sun rise over his struggling cornfields, something in his gut told him that past was about to come roaring back into their lives. 15 years of elite military operations had taught him to trust those instincts. They'd kept him alive when intel failed, when missions went sideways, when everything fell apart except the iron discipline that made him one of the deadliest snipers in naval special warfare history. The morning news would prove those instincts right, but for now, he simply watched the sun climb higher, checking sightlines out of habit, mentally calculating distances and wind adjustments that he hoped he'd never need to use again. Some skills you never lose, even when you trade a rifle for a tractor. Some instincts never fade, even when you bury them under 8 years of peaceful routine. The kitchen radio crackled with static as Jake prepared breakfast. Matt sat at the worn wooden table, scrolling through his phone between bites of cereal. The morning routine shattered when the local station cut to breaking news. We interrupt our regular programming for an emergency broadcast. 6 inmates have escaped from Lincoln State Penitentiary during last night's shift change. Among them, former Special Forces operative Marcus Vale, serving multiple life sentences for international terrorism charges. 2 guards were found dead, others injured. State police warn these individuals should be considered extremely dangerous. Jake's hand froze mid-reach for his coffee cup. Marcus Vale. The name hit him like a physical blow, conjuring images of that blood-soaked night in Kandahar. The mission file had called it a successful elimination of a terrorist cell. Reality had been messier. Vale's brother had been there, playing both sides, feeding information to both terrorists and American forces. When everything went sideways, Michael Vale had chosen his brother over his country. Jake's shot had ended that choice permanently. "Dad?" Matt looked up from his phone, showing him a news alert with mugshots. "They're saying these guys are military trained. You think they'll come this way?" Jake studied the faces on Matt's screen. Besides Vale, he recognized two others, former Delta Force operators who'd gone mercenary. The other three were unknown, but their dead-eyed stares spoke of professional killers. This wasn't a simple prison break. This was a tactical extraction. "The prison's 40 miles east," Jake said carefully. "They'll avoid main roads, stick to backcountry, probably split up to confuse pursuit." He didn't mention that his farm sat at the intersection of 3 county roads, perfect for coordinating scattered teams. Sheriff Cooper's patrol car pulled up outside, lights off but moving fast. The old lawman had been sheriff when Jake bought the farm, smart enough to recognize military training but professional enough not to ask questions. Now he looked rattled, hand resting too close to his sidearm. "Jake," Cooper nodded as he approached, "got more details from the prison. Guards were killed with military precision, single shots, close range. Security cameras were looped, communications jammed. Someone inside helped, someone with serious resources. Any direction of travel? Nothing solid, but—" Cooper hesitated. "Jake, Vale was asking questions about this area last month. Visitor logs show his lawyer requesting local maps, property records." Jake's mind raced through implications. Vale had planned this, had chosen this direction deliberately. The question was whether Jake himself was the primary target, or just a convenient piece of unfinished business. "Keep Matt inside today," Cooper advised. "State police are setting up checkpoints, but these guys, they're ghosts." After Cooper left, Jake watched Matt finishing his breakfast, innocent of the storm about to break over their quiet life. 8 years of peace were about to end. Vale would come. Jake was certain of that. The only question was whether he was coming for revenge or something bigger. The barn's weathered doors creaked open as Jake led Matt inside. Time to show his son what lay beneath their peaceful farming facade. To anyone else, the back corner looked like typical storage. Rusty tools hanging on the wall, bags of seed, stacked against weathered boards. But Jake hadn't survived 15 years in special operations without learning to hide things in plain sight. His fingers found the hidden pressure point beneath a workbench. A soft click and hydraulics whirred silently, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "Dad?" Matt's voice wavered between awe and fear. "What is this?" "Insurance," Jake replied, leading his son downward. Motion sensors activated soft LED lighting, illuminating a room that belonged more in a military facility than beneath a Nebraska corn farm. His Barrett M82 rested in its custom case, alongside an array of weapons he'd officially surrendered when he retired. The walls held tactical gear, communications equipment, and enough ammunition to hold off a small army. Everything meticulously maintained, routinely checked, because Jake had learned the hard way that you never know when the past might come hunting. "This is why you chose this farm, isn't it?" Matt asked, understanding dawning in his eyes. "The sight lines, the escape routes you made me memorize." 8 years ago, I helped take down a terrorist cell in Afghanistan," Jake explained, checking his weapons with practiced efficiency. "Marcus Vale was their leader. His brother Michael was supposed to be our informant, but he betrayed us. The mission went bad. 14 terrorists died, including Michael." Jake remembered that night with crystal clarity. The crosswinds had been tricky, the shot nearly impossible, but they didn't call him Ghost for nothing. When the firefight ended, Michael Vale lay dead alongside his terrorist companions, and Marcus was in custody, swearing vengeance. "Vale's not just escaping," Jake continued, loading magazines with mechanical precision. "He's hunting, and this farm, these fields we've worked for 8 years, they're about to become a battlefield." "Let me help," Matt insisted. "You've been training me all along, haven't you? All those lessons about observation, about always knowing your surroundings." Jake paused, studying his son. Matt was right. Every hunting trip, every lesson about tracking weather and wind had been preparation. But this wasn't training anymore. This was survival. "Your job is to get clear," Jake said firmly, handing Matt a satellite phone and a thick envelope. "Head to your grandfather's in Oklahoma. If you don't hear from me in 3 days, there are instructions in that envelope. Bank accounts, contact numbers for my old team." "Dad, I can't just leave you." "You can, and you will." Jake's voice carried the command authority that had once directed elite combat teams. "Because if I'm worried about protecting you, I can't focus on stopping them. And son, they have to be stopped." As Matt reluctantly packed his truck, Jake began transforming his farm into a defensive position. All those years of crop rotation, irrigation planning, and fence maintenance had served a dual purpose. Every field had been prepared as a potential kill zone, every approach route considered and planned for. Vale thought he was hunting a retired operator. He was about to learn that some predators never lose their edge. They just wait patiently for the right moment to strike. After Matt's departure, Jake began detecting signs of surveillance. Most farmers wouldn't notice the subtle indicators. Broken corn stalks with unnatural patterns, disturbed gravel on access roads, the occasional glint of optics from the tree line. But Jake wasn't most farmers. His satellite phone buzzed with an encrypted message from his former communications officer. Chatter picked up. "V has serious backing, military-grade gear, private contractors involved. Watch your 6. That explained the professional-level surveillance. Someone with deep pockets wanted Vale free, which meant this was bigger than personal revenge. Jake spotted more evidence near the eastern fence line: fresh cigarette butts, American Spirits, Vale's old brand. They'd been field-stripped, tobacco scattered to minimize detection. Professional work, but a deliberate message. Vale wanted him to know they were coming. Using his farming routine as cover, Jake mapped their observation posts. 3 main positions, plus mobile teams using the corn for concealment. They were good, maintaining proper distances, minimizing signs, using standard special forces protocols. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They were using tactics Jake had helped develop. His old commanding officer had called him the farmer for his patience in setting up shots. Now those same skills served a different purpose. Each defensive position was carefully planned, each backup route memorized. The irrigation pipes he'd installed last summer could become improvised explosives. The drainage ditches he'd dug offered concealed movement routes. Sheriff Cooper's patrol car appeared around sunset, driving slowly past the farm. Through his scope, Jake caught the subtle hand signal. Police channels were compromised, radio silence advised. They were on their own. His thermal imaging showed 4 figures moving through the corn at dusk, maintaining professional spacing. Their equipment profiles matched current military issue. Someone had supplied them with top-grade gear. They were setting up for a night operation, probably coordinating with other teams staging nearby. Jake's farming equipment became tactical assets. The combine's height offered an excellent sniper platform. Fuel tanks could become improvised explosives. Even the irrigation system could be weaponized, turning sections of his land into impassable mud that would channel attackers into prepared kill zones. A distant dog barked 3 times, one of Cooper's deputies signaling movement on the county road. More vehicles arriving, parking in concealed positions. Vale was assembling his force, preparing for a coordinated assault. They'd wait for full darkness, using night vision gear to press their advantage. But darkness had always been Jake's ally. They didn't call him Ghost because he was easy to spot. In his SEAL days, he'd owned the night, turning darkness into a weapon. Now, 8 years of working this land had given him intimate knowledge of every shadow, every dip and rise, every potential hiding spot. His thermal scope caught more movement, teams getting into position, establishing overlapping fields of fire. Their formation was textbook special forces, exactly what he would have expected from Vale. But Jake had learned long ago that textbook responses get you killed in asymmetric warfare. Time to show them why. The weather forecast called for severe thunderstorms, perfect cover for an assault. Jake watched dark clouds building on the horizon as he made his final preparations. The barometer was dropping rapidly, and his cornstalks swayed in the strengthening wind. Local news had updated the prison break story. 3 more bodies discovered along rural roads: a farmer, a gas station attendant, and a trucker, all killed with clinical efficiency. Vale's team was moving fast, eliminating potential witnesses while gathering supplies. Through his thermal scope, Jake counted 12 distinct heat signatures surrounding his property. Their equipment profiles confirmed his fears: latest generation tactical gear, military-grade weapons. Someone with serious resources had bankrolled this operation. His satellite phone buzzed with another encrypted message: confirmation, Blackwater involved, private military contractors providing backup, high-value target extraction planned. You're in the way. This wasn't just about revenge. Vale's escape was part of something bigger, something that required his specific skills. Jake's farm had become an obstacle in a much larger operation. The first lightning flashes illuminated the cornfields in stark relief. Jake caught glimpses of tactical teams moving into final position, their formation suggesting extensive practice. They'd rehearsed this, probably using satellite imagery and drone footage to plan their approach. Thunder rolled across the darkening sky as Jake completed his defensive setup. He'd transformed his property into a tactical nightmare for attackers. Tripwires in the corn rows, pressure sensors near likely approach routes, and carefully planned fields of fire covering every angle. The storm would ground police helicopters and blind satellite surveillance. Vale would make his move tonight, using the weather for cover. But storms cut both ways. Their night vision would be degraded by rain, their thermal imaging confused by temperature changes. Jake's farming equipment had been repositioned to create choke points. His combine now housed remote detonated charges. Irrigation pipes became improvised claymore mines. Even his grain silo was rigged to collapse on command, ready to cut off retreat routes. Through the growing darkness, Jake spotted the telltale red glow of infrared beacons, team leaders coordinating their positions. Their approach vectors suggested someone with intimate knowledge of special forces tactics. But Jake had helped write those tactics, and he'd spent 8 years planning countermeasures. The wind carried the faint sound of radio static, encrypted, communications being established. Vale's team was synchronizing their watches, preparing for a coordinated assault. They thought superior numbers and equipment guaranteed victory. Time to teach them the difference between hunting and being hunted. The farmhouse landline rang at exactly midnight. Jake had been expecting it. Psychological warfare was always part of Vale's playbook. He let it ring 3 times before answering, his thermal scope never leaving the eastern approach. 8 years is a long time to plan this conversation, Ghost. Vale's voice carried the same cold precision Jake remembered from the interrogation room after Kandahar. 4 bodies so far, Marcus. Getting sloppy. Necessary sacrifices, like my brother was? Lightning flashed outside as Jake caught movement. In his peripheral vision, tactical teams using the storm's cover to advance through the corn. Their formation was perfect, too perfect. These weren't just escaped convicts. Your brother made his choice, Jake replied, adjusting his scope. Played both sides until it got people killed. He was trying to protect me. Vale's tone hardened. You know what's funny, Ghost? Everyone thinks you retired to this pathetic farm because of PTSD or guilt, but we both know better. You chose this location. Perfect sightlines, multiple escape routes, natural choke points. You've been waiting for someone to come hunting. Jake remained silent, tracking movement through his thermal scope. 12 operators moving in standard assault formation. Their equipment was definitely military-grade, latest generation stuff that shouldn't be available to escaped convicts. Those aren't prison buddies you brought with you, Jake observed. Private military contractors. Someone's invested a lot in breaking you out. Vale's laugh carried genuine amusement. Still the same tactical mind. Yes, I've got backing now. Powerful people who appreciate my particular skills. This could have been simple. You're just a speed bump on tonight's agenda, but I convinced them to let me handle you personally. This is about more than revenge. Much more. There's a cargo plane waiting at a private airstrip. By morning, I'll be consulting for people who can afford my expertise in asymmetric warfare. But first, I get to eliminate the man who ruined my life. You ruined your own life, Marcus. I just pulled the trigger, and now I have better training, better equipment, and 15 private military contractors surrounding your farm. Your defensive setup is impressive. We've been watching you prepare all day, but you're outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. Jake spotted 2 more teams moving into position, their gear marking them as Blackwater operators. Vale had serious backing indeed. Here's the thing about hunting ghosts, Marcus. Sometimes they hunt back. The phone line went dead as Jake activated his first defensive measure. Carefully placed charges demolished the grain silo, its collapse cutting off the eastern approach. In the chaos, he disabled 2 operators with precise shots to their body armor. No kill shots. He needed prisoners for questioning. Vale's response came instantly, coordinated suppressing fire from multiple positions. But Jake was already moving, using routes he'd prepared over 8 years of farming. The real battle was about to begin, and only one hunter would survive the night. Thunder cracked overhead as Vale's teams launched their first coordinated assault. Night vision equipment gave them confidence in the darkness. But Jake had prepared for this. Buried charges detonated in sequence, creating disorienting flashes that overwhelmed their expensive optics. The cornfields became a maze of death. Jake had spent years planning this defense, using his crops as concealment, creating invisible barriers with irrigation pipes and maintenance paths. Now those careful preparations paid off as Vale's professional operators found themselves channeled into prepared kill zones. Team 2, breach the barn! Vale's voice crackled over their encrypted channel. Jake's communications intercept let him track their movements. Team 3, maintain suppressing fire on the house. The rest converge on secondary positions. Jake's first counterattack caught them by surprise. Years of hunting had taught him to read wind patterns in the corn. Now he used that knowledge to time his shots between gusts, the sound of his suppressed rifle hidden by thunder. 2 more contractors went down, disabled by precise shots to their armor. He's not in the house, one operator reported, professional and calm cracking. Thermals showing nothing but automated heat sources. Because he's hunting, Vale responded. Spread out, maintain visual contact, watch the high ground. But spreading out was exactly what Jake wanted. His farm's irrigation system had been modified for this moment. With the press of a button, key sections of ground turned to mud, trapping teams in exposed positions. Pre-sighted rifles on remote triggers opened fire, forcing them into progressively smaller spaces. A massive explosion lit up the night. Vale's teams had found one of Jake's equipment caches, but they'd triggered the failsafe, and 3 more contractors disappeared in the blast. Professional tip, Jake broadcast on their frequency. When raiding a sniper's hideout, check for booby traps. Getting cocky, Ghost, Vale replied, but Jake heard the strain in his voice. 8 operators down, but I've still got superior numbers. Numbers don't mean much when you're being hunted. To prove his point, Jake triggered his next trap. The combine he'd positioned that morning exploded, sending shrapnel across carefully planned vectors. More operators down, their formation broken. Vale switched tactics, ordering his remaining teams to fall back and regroup. But retreat paths had been pre-sighted, covered by automated gun positions Jake had spent years perfecting. The professional contractors found themselves caught in a deadly crossfire, their tactical training useless against years of methodical preparation. "You're not just some washed-up farmer," one contractor realized too late. "This whole place is a kill box." 8 years, Jake replied, putting another operator down with a shot to the leg. 8 years of planning, preparing, waiting, because I knew someone would come hunting eventually. The only question was whether they'd be smart enough to realize they weren't the predator. The storm reached its peak as Vale's carefully planned assault fell apart. His remaining operators were pinned down, their superior equipment rendered useless by Jake's intimate knowledge of the terrain. But Jake knew this was just the first wave. Vale had more resources, more men. The real battle was just beginning. Jake interrogated one of the disabled contractors in a storm cellar he'd converted into a holding area. The man's gear confirmed his worst fears. Latest generation tactical equipment, specialized communications devices, and diplomatic credentials hidden in a waterproof case. "Who's backing Vale?" Jake demanded, examining the credentials. They looked authentic, complete with diplomatic seals from a small Eastern European nation. "You're interfering with something bigger than you understand," the contractor replied, professional training evident in his resistance. "Vale's skills are needed. Certain parties are willing to pay well for his expertise in asymmetric warfare." Jake's satellite phone buzzed. A message from his old SEAL team intelligence officer. "Chatter indicates major arms deal planned. Vale's escape timed to coordinate with weapons shipment. High-level political coverage involved." The contractor's eyes widened slightly at Jake's phone, recognition showing. "You're still connected, Ghost Squadron. We were told you were retired, isolated." "I am retired," Jake replied, checking the man's wounds. "But some connections never fade." His thermal scope showed Vale's remaining teams regrouping at the edge of the property. Their formation had changed. No longer trying to eliminate him quickly, they were settling in for a siege. Through the storm, Jake caught glimpses of new vehicles arriving. More contractors, more equipment. "You can't stop this," the contractor warned. "Vale has government backing now, black budgets, diplomatic immunity. By sunrise, he'll be on a private jet with enough weapons to start a small war." "Where's the shipment?" "Even if I knew you're one man. Our clients have invested too much to let this fail." Jake's radio crackled. Sheriff Cooper's voice tense but controlled. "State police intercepted 3 trucks on Route 27. Heavy weapons, military grade. Driver had diplomatic papers." "That's just the decoy." The contractor smiled coldly. "Standard. Protocol. Sacrifice a small shipment to distract from the main cargo." A new message from Jake's intelligence contact confirmed it. Satellite imagery showed unusual activity at a private airstrip 20 miles north. Cargo planes being prepped, flight plans filed for international departure. Vale's voice cut through. Their encrypted channel. "Getting the picture, Ghost? You're not just fighting me anymore. You're fighting nations, corporations, people who shape the world. Stand down, and maybe they'll let you keep playing farmer." Jake studied his properties. Thermal image. At least 20 new hostiles had arrived, setting up professional siege positions. Their equipment signature identified them as former Russian Spetsnaz. Vale was calling in serious favors. "Last chance," Vale continued. "You've got skills, Ghost. The people I work for could use someone with your expertise. Better than dying alone defending a failing farm." But Vale had revealed more than he intended. The airstrip, the weapons, the diplomatic coverage, pieces of a larger operation falling into place. Jake's farm wasn't just in the way, it was a vital link in their transportation route. He keyed his radio. "Thanks for the offer, Marcus, but you forgot something important." "And what's that?" "I chose this farm for a reason. 20 miles to the private airstrip, perfect range for a Barrett M82, even in this weather." Vale's silence spoke volumes. He hadn't known Jake was aware of the airstrip, hadn't realized that 8 years of calculating wind patterns and atmospheric conditions had a purpose beyond farming. The real hunt was about to begin. The storm provided perfect cover as Jake moved through his cornfields, using irrigation ditches and maintenance paths he'd carefully maintained for years. His Barrett M82 was already positioned in a concealed bunker, one of several sniper hides he'd built while pretending to repair farm equipment. His satellite phone vibrated, thermal imaging from an old teammate's surveillance drone. 3 cargo planes at the private airstrip being loaded under the cover of darkness. Diplomatic markings, hastily painted on their sides, but their profile matched Russian military transport aircraft. "4 teams approaching your position," his radio crackled, Sheriff Cooper maintaining discreet contact. "Professional gear, military vehicles disguised as farm equipment." Jake was already moving. Vale's men had night vision and thermal imaging, but he had something better, intimate knowledge of every inch of this land. He'd spent 8 years memorizing distances, calculating shot angles, noting how wind moved through the corn rows at different heights. The first shot came at exactly 2 a.m. From over a mile away, Jake's bullet struck the lead cargo plane's fuel tank. The explosion illuminated the airstrip like daylight, sending Vale's carefully planned operation into chaos. "Ghost Squadron sends their regards," Jake broadcast on Vale's frequency. "Looks like your diplomatic immunity doesn't stop 50 caliber rounds." Vale's response was immediate and devastating. His remaining teams opened fire with everything they had, trying to saturate Jake's possible hiding spots with bullets. But Jake was already gone, moving to his next pre-sighted position. The second cargo plane erupted in flames 3 minutes later. Jake's shot had threaded through a gap in their defensive positions, proving why he'd earned his reputation as one of the best snipers in special operations history. "You're interfering with $100 million operation," Vale snarled over the radio. "These weapons are already paid for. Governments will fall if this shipment fails." "Should have picked a different route," Jake replied, putting a round through the third plane's cockpit. His thermal scope showed pure chaos at the airstrip. Vale's contractors were professional, but they'd never faced anything like this. Precise sniper fire from multiple angles, seemingly impossible shots timed perfectly with rolling thunder. "He's not working alone," one contractor reported. Panic evident. Must have his whole team out there. But Jake was very much alone. He'd just spent 8 years preparing for this moment, setting up interlocking fields of fire, calculating every possible angle. His farm wasn't just a hiding place, it was a sniper's paradise, positioned perfectly to control the surrounding area. Vale switched tactics, ordering his men to flood the farm's approaches. But Jake had planned for this too. Automated defenses activated, turning kill zones into death traps. Years of seemingly innocent farm work had disguised the placement of claymore mines, remote-triggered explosives, and interlocking fields of fire. "You're right about one thing," Jake broadcast, as more contractors fell to his precisely aimed fire. "I'm not just some washed-up farmer. I'm the ghost you should have never stopped watching for." The night erupted in chaos as Vale's operation crumbled, but Jake knew this was just the beginning. Vale had more resources, more men, and nothing left to lose. The real battle was still to come. Dawn approached as Vale revealed his contingency plans. 3 black helicopters appeared on the horizon, their silenced rotors barely audible over the dying storm. Military gunships, stripped of identification marks, the kind of hardware only available to state-level actors. Jake's satellite phone lit up with urgent messages from his old team. Surveillance satellites showed diplomatic motorcades leaving 6 embassies simultaneously. A coordinated operation years in the planning was falling apart because of one retired sniper who refused to be pushed off his land. "You've got no idea what you've started," Vale's voice crackled through the radio. "Those weapons were meant to change the balance of power in 3 countries, billions in bribes, years of planning, all arranged for tonight." "Should have picked a different route," Jake replied, already moving to his next position. His thermal scope showed Vale's reinforcements, deploying with military precision, at least 30 new operators taking up positions around his farm. Sheriff Cooper's voice came through on their secure channel. "Jake, got word from state police. Federal agencies are being blocked by diplomatic interference. We're on our own." The helicopters began their attack run, missile pods tracking heat. Signatures across Jake's property, but he'd prepared for this too. Buried thermal devices activated, creating false targets that drew their fire away from his actual positions. "Think about the bigger picture," Vale continued, real emotion creeping into his voice. "These weapons will arm freedom fighters, help oppressed people rise against dictators. We're on the right side of history, like you were in Kandahar." Jake triggered another series of charges, channeling Vale's forces into prepared kill zones. "Your brother died because you convinced him he was fighting for justice, but it was always about profit." His Barrett spoke again, the heavy round punching. Through one helicopter's tail rotor, the pilot's skill kept it from crashing, but it was forced to retreat, weapon systems damaged. Vale's response was immediate and devastating. His remaining teams launched a coordinated assault using the helicopter gunfire as cover. They were good, former Special Forces operators who'd been training together for years. Their movement through the corn was perfect, their fields of fire interlocking with practiced precision. But Jake had spent 8 years preparing for exactly this scenario. Each irrigation ditch concealed claymore mines. Every tractor had been positioned to provide cover or channel enemy movement. Even the corn rows were planted to create subtle, fatal funnels, guiding attackers into pre-sighted killing grounds. "Your farm is surrounded by the best wet work specialists money can buy," Vale taunted. "Ex-Spetsnaz, former Delta, retired SAS. You can't hold out forever." "Don't need to hold out forever," Jake replied, putting another precisely aimed round through the second helicopter's fuel tank. "Just long enough." His satellite phone buzzed again, messages from his old team. They'd traced the operation's financial backing to several defense contractors and private military companies. Evidence was being leaked to international media. Vale's diplomatic cover was crumbling. But Jake knew Vale wouldn't retreat. There was too much money involved, too many powerful people expecting their weapons shipment. The battle for his farm was about to become a war. Vale's next attack came from all directions simultaneously. Teams of contractors breached Jake's outer defenses using shaped charges and coordinated assault tactics. Their night vision equipment cut through the pre-dawn darkness, giving them confidence as they pushed through the cornfields. But Jake had planned for this too. Automated defense systems activated in sequence, turning his farm into a killing ground. Remote-triggered rifles opened fire from concealed positions. Carefully placed explosives channeled the attackers into prepared ambush zones. "Getting tired yet, Ghost?" Vale's voice carried real concern now. "You're good, but you're one man. My teams have been training for this exact scenario for months." Jake's response came in the form of precise shots that disabled 3 more contractors. No kill shots, he needed prisoners for leverage. His farm's irrigation system had been modified to create instant swamps, trapping teams in exposed positions while he picked them apart. "This isn't just about weapons anymore," Vale continued. "Your interference has exposed operations in 6 countries. Very powerful people are losing millions by the minute. There's nowhere you can hide after this. Not trying to hide, Jake replied, triggering another series of charges that scattered an assault team. Just making sure you don't profit from any more dead brothers. That hit home. Vale's voice hardened. Michael believed in the cause. He died fighting for something bigger than himself. Michael died because you convinced him that smuggling weapons made him a freedom fighter. How many more brothers have to die for your profit margins? The radio crackled with Sheriff Cooper's urgent warning. Jake, multiple vehicles approaching from the county road, military transport trucks with diplomatic plates. Through his thermal scope, Jake watched Vale's reinforcements arrive. The trucks carried more than just troops. They were bringing up serious hardware, vehicle-mounted heavy weapons, mortars, the kind of firepower that could level his entire farm. "Last chance, Ghost," Vale offered. "Stand down now. Walk away. There's still a place for someone with your skills in my organization." Jake's satellite phone vibrated with another message from his old team. They'd traced the operation's real objective. These weapons weren't just meant for profit. They were the first shipment in a coordinated effort to destabilize multiple governments, creating opportunities for private military companies to seize control of key regions. "You're right about one thing, Marcus," Jake responded, already moving to his next position. "This is bigger than just weapons smuggling. That's why it has to be stopped." Vale's answer came in the form of coordinated mortar fire. High explosive rounds began systematically destroying Jake's farm, collapsing his barn, cratering his fields. But each explosion revealed something Vale hadn't expected. More hidden defenses, more prepared positions, more evidence that this quiet farm had been designed as a fortress. "You've spent 8 years preparing for this exact scenario," Vale realized. "Every irrigation ditch, every fence line, every piece of equipment. It's all part of your defense plan." "Sometimes the best way to catch a predator," Jake replied, his rifle picking off another contractor, "is to build the perfect trap and wait." The sun began to rise over his burning fields as Jake prepared for Vale's final assault. The real battle was about to begin, and only one hunter would survive the dawn. The morning sun revealed the devastation of Jake's farm. Craters from mortar fire scarred his fields, burning equipment cast black smoke into the dawn sky. But Vale's forces had paid heavily for each foot gained. Disabled contractors lay scattered across the property, their expensive gear useless against Jake's precise shooting. "Sir, we've got a problem," one of Vale's commanders reported over their channel. "International news is picking up the story. Someone's leaking documents about the operation. Our diplomatic cover's blown." Jake's satellite phone confirmed it. His old team had been busy. Financial records, weapons manifests, diplomatic cables, evidence of the conspiracy was flooding. Global media, Vale's carefully constructed network, was unraveling. "Your corporate backers are abandoning ship," Jake broadcast. "Those diplomatic credentials won't protect you much longer." Vale's response was instant and brutal. His remaining helicopters launched missile strikes against Jake's positions, while ground teams pushed forward under heavy covering fire. They'd abandoned precision for overwhelming force, trying to kill everything that moved. "You think exposing the operation changes anything?" Vale snarled. "The weapons are already paid for. The bribes are distributed. The governments are compromised. All you're doing is making it messy." Jake triggered his next set of defenses. Hidden fuel tanks exploded in sequence, creating a wall of fire that trapped Vale's eastern teams. His modified irrigation system turned sections of field into swampland, bogging down their heavy vehicles. "This was never about freedom fighters," Jake replied, disabling another contractor with a precise shot. "You're arming both sides of these conflicts, creating wars your private military companies can profit from." "Because that's how the world really works." Vale's composure cracked. You think playing soldier for the government made you righteous. We're bringing order to chaos, making profit from inevitable conflicts. My brother understood that. Your brother died believing he was fighting for justice. How many more brothers have to die for your profit margins? A new message from Jake's team caught his attention. Satellite imagery showed rapid movement at 6 different airports. Vale's corporate backers were evacuating, trying to distance themselves from the operation, but they were leaving their mercenaries behind. Your employers are cutting their losses, Jake broadcast. How loyal do you think these contractors will be when the money stops flowing? He watched through his scope as uncertainty spread through Vale's forces. These weren't true believers. They were professionals who'd been promised diplomatic protection and corporate backing. Now they were exposed, their crimes being broadcast worldwide. Vale must have sensed the shifting mood. His next radio transmission carried an edge of desperation. Double pay for everyone who stays. Triple for anyone who brings me Turner's head. But Jake had spent 15 years in special operations. He knew the difference between motivated soldiers and hired guns. Vale's mercenaries were already weighing their options, calculating risks against diminishing rewards. You've got one chance, Jake offered on an open channel. Surrender now. Provide evidence against your employers. Because in about an hour, this valley will be swarming with federal agencies who won't care about diplomatic immunity. The sun climbed higher as Vale's carefully constructed operation collapsed around him. But Jake knew this only made him more dangerous. A cornered predator is the most lethal kind. Vale's desperation manifested in a savage new strategy. His remaining team split into smaller units, abandoning military precision for pure aggression. They weren't trying to capture the farm anymore. They were trying to kill everything that moved. Found something interesting in your son's room. Vale's voice carried deadly intent. High school baseball trophies, college application essays, senior year photos. Tell me, Ghost, does Matt know where his grandfather lives in Oklahoma? Jake's blood ran cold. He'd been so focused on defending the farm, he hadn't considered that Vale might have other teams in play. Touch my son. Jake's voice carried deadly calm. And there's not a hole deep enough to hide in. Already got a team en route. Amazing what you can do with a teenager's social media profile. Should reach Oklahoma in about 3 hours. Jake's satellite phone buzzed. His team was already moving. Matt secure, the message read. SEAL Team 3 providing escort. Grandfather's location protected. But Vale's threat had achieved its purpose. Jake's methodical defense turned aggressive as paternal instinct overrode tactical patience. His next shots weren't aimed to disable, they were kill shots, each round finding gaps in body armor with lethal precision. There's the killer I remember, Vale taunted. Not so worried about taking prisoners now, are you? 3 more contractors fell to Jake's rifle before they could reach cover. His automated defenses switched to lethal protocols, turning hidden positions into kill zones. Vale had crossed a line, and Jake's response was devastating. Sir, a contractor's panicked voice cut through the channel. 3 teams just went dark. He's hunting us now. They were right. Jake had shifted from defender to predator, using skills honed through 15 years of special operations. His knowledge of the terrain became a weapon as he moved through hidden paths, striking from unexpected angles. Vale's remaining forces began to break. These were professionals who'd faced dangerous opponents before, but they'd never encountered anything like this. A master sniper fighting on terrain he'd spent 8 years preparing, driven by a father's rage. Fall back, Vale ordered, but it was too late. Jake had switched to his secondary positions, cutting off their retreat routes with precisely aimed fire. More contractors fell as they tried to reach their vehicles, Jake's shots finding them despite their cover. Your son was never the target, Vale admitted, real fear creeping into his voice. But I needed you angry, needed you to make mistakes. Only mistake was not killing you in Kandahar. Jake's rifle cracked again, eliminating Vale's command team with brutal efficiency. Won't repeat that error. Through his scope, Jake watched Vale's remaining forces collapse into chaos. Their sophisticated tactical gear became a liability as Jake systematically destroyed their night vision equipment, communications, and heavy weapons. Each shot was perfectly placed, each target eliminated with cold precision. But Vale himself remained hidden, coordinating his dwindling forces from somewhere in the chaos. The real battle would be personal, and both hunters knew it was coming. Vale's last card played out as federal helicopters appeared on the horizon. 3 black SUVs raced toward the farm, each carrying what looked like diplomatic security teams. But Jake recognized their movement patterns. These were Vale's elite squad, saved for this moment. "You know what's in those vehicles?" Vale's voice carried triumph. "Thermobaric weapons, military prototype, designed for bunker busting, your hidden positions, your underground caches, all useless against this." Jake's satellite phone confirmed it. His old team's surveillance showed the weapon's thermal signature. One detonation would create a vacuum bomb effect, powerful enough to collapse every structure on his property. "Those are banned by international treaty," Jake replied, already moving to higher ground. "Using them invalidates your diplomatic coverage. You think I care about diplomatic coverage now?" Vale laughed bitterly. "You've ruined everything else. This is about making sure there's nothing left of you to find." The SUVs split up, taking positions that would surround the farm. Jake recognized the tactic. They were creating a kill zone that would leave no escape routes. The thermobaric weapons would turn his entire property into ground zero. "Your corporate backers won't approve this level of attention," Jake warned, disabling another contractor with a precise shot. "My corporate backers are already gone, private jets scattered to non-extradition countries the moment you exposed the operation. I'm freelancing now." Through his scope, Jake watched Vale's elite teams unload their deadly cargo. The weapons were exactly as dangerous as threatened. Compressed aerosol explosives in hardened casings, designed to create devastating pressure waves that would collapse every structure within half a mile. "Sir," one of Vale's remaining commanders cut in, "civilian vehicles approaching from the south. Local farmers, looks like." Jake's heart sank as he recognized the trucks. Sheriff Cooper had called in reinforcements. Rural neighbors coming to help defend one of their own. They had hunting rifles and shotguns, but they'd be helpless against Vale's professional killers. "Perfect!" Vale's voice carried cold satisfaction. "More witnesses to eliminate. Fire teams, engage any vehicle that approaches. Weapons team, begin final countdown." Jake had seconds to make an impossible choice. His hidden bunkers could protect him from the thermobaric blast, but his neighbors would be caught in the kill zone. Stopping the weapons meant exposing himself to Vale's snipers. "Last chance, Ghost," Vale offered. "You've got 30 seconds before we level everything. Come out, face me personally, and I'll let the farmers live." Through his thermal scope, Jake watched Vale emerge from cover, standing in plain sight, a deliberate taunt inviting a final confrontation. Around him, elite contractors maintained overlapping fields of fire, ready to cut down anything that moved. 20 seconds, Vale called out. "Lot of innocent people about to die, Ghost, all because you couldn't let go of the past." Jake's satellite phone buzzed one final time. His team had found something, evidence that would destroy Vale completely. But retrieving it meant surviving the next 5 minutes. Time to make a choice. Jake emerged from cover with his hands raised, rifle slung across his back. Vale's snipers tracked his movement, but held their fire. This was personal now. Beyond profits, beyond weapons deals, beyond international conspiracies. Dramatic as. "Always Ghost," Vale called out, standing in the middle of the devastated cornfield. His tactical gear was top grade, his stance showing years of professional training. "Remember Kandahar?" How you waited until the perfect moment, watched through. Your scope as my brother died. Your brother chose his path. Jake moved carefully, counting Vale's remaining forces. 12 elite contractors in covered positions, weapons primed. The thermobaric devices were behind Vale, ready for detonation. He chose to protect his family, something you should understand, being a father. Vale's smile was cold. Speaking of family, my team should be reaching Oklahoma soon. SEAL Team 3 has my son, Jake replied calmly. Your hit squad won't make it within 5 miles of him. That hit home. Vale's composure cracked slightly. Always one step ahead. That's why I had to be sure about this operation. 8 years of planning, building covers, arranging diplomatic protection, all ruined because you couldn't just be a simple farmer. This was never about farming. Jake was 30 yards from Vale now, moving with measured steps. You chose this route because you knew I was here, needed to prove you could beat me. You're right. Vale drew his sidearm with practiced grace. This is about finishing what started in Kandahar. But first, I want you to watch your world burn. He raised his other hand, holding a detonator. His contractors tensed, weapons ready. In the distance, Jake could hear approaching vehicles, his neighbors coming to help, unaware they were driving into a death trap. Drop the rifle, Vale commanded. On your knees. I want you to see everything you tried to protect turn to ash. Jake slowly unslung his Barrett, letting it fall. The heavy rifle hit the ground as approaching engines grew louder. Vale's finger tightened on the detonator. Any last words, Ghost? Any final sniper wisdom before I send you to join my brother? Jake smiled slightly. Just one thing. You really should have counted the fence posts. Vale's expression shifted from triumph to confusion, then to horrified understanding as he spotted the glint of morning sun on metal. Each fence post, Jake had repaired over 8 years, contained a surprise. Small-caliber rifles controlled by a remote system, pre-sighted on this exact position. Jake dropped as the posts erupted with precise fire. Vale's contractors went down in the first volley, their perfect positions useless against attacks from angles they hadn't considered. Vale himself took 2 rounds to his shooting arm, the detonator falling harmlessly. 8 years, Jake said, retrieving his rifle. 8 years of preparing, watching, waiting, because I knew someone like you would come eventually, someone who'd threaten not just me, but my neighbors, my community. Vale laughed through his pain, always the tactical genius. But you forgot something important. What's that? I brought my own ghost. A shot cracked across the field as Vale's hidden sniper revealed his position. But Jake had been counting on this too. Some battles aren't won by those with the most firepower, but by those who've spent years learning to hunt other predators. The shot came from the tree line, precise, professional, but just slightly off as Jake rolled behind cover. Through his scope, he caught a glimpse of the shooter, Viktor Kos, former Russian Spetsnaz sniper with a reputation that rivaled his own. Like him? Vale called out, clutching his wounded arm. Took months to convince him to join us. Cost more than most military budgets, but worth every penny to get the man who outshot the ghost. Jake analyzed the shot pattern. Kos was good, perhaps the best he'd ever encountered. The Russian had chosen his position perfectly, using the rising sun and wind patterns to his advantage, but he'd made one crucial mistake. Impressive resume, Jake replied, already moving to his next position. But he's fighting on my ground. Another shot cracked across the field, so close Jake felt the round pass by. Kos was reading his movement patterns, anticipating his routes. This wasn't just a sniper. This was a hunter who specialized in eliminating other snipers. You're not the only one who studies terrain, Vale taunted. Kos has been memorizing your property for weeks. Every sightline, every possible hide. You've got nowhere to run. But Jake wasn't running. Each movement was deliberate, drawing Kos's attention while his automated defenses repositioned. The Russian was good, but he didn't know about the underground tunnels Jake had spent years building. the hidden bunkers that created impossible angles. "Tell me something," Jake called out, triggering a series of smoke charges that obscured Koss's vision. "Did Vale mention why they called me Ghost?" A third shot split the smoke, showing Koss's incredible skill. But Jake was already gone, using routes he'd prepared for exactly this scenario. His farm wasn't just a defensive position. It was a giant trap designed to defeat even the best snipers. "Because you disappeared after shots," Koss's heavily accented voice carried across the battlefield. "All snipers learn this trick." "No," Jake replied, his own shot causing the Russian to duck into cover. "Because I learned to hunt other ghosts." The real battle began as two master snipers engaged in a deadly game of cat and mouse. Koss was everything his reputation promised: patient, precise, lethal. But Jake had spent 8 years preparing for this moment, turning his entire property into one giant sniper's puzzle. "Impossible," Koss muttered, as Jake's shots came from seemingly impossible angles. "No one can shoot through these gaps." "Every fence post," Jake explained, his next round grazing the Russian's position. "Every irrigation pipe, every piece of farm equipment, all positioned to create killing angles that only I know about." Vale watched in growing horror as his ace in the hole found himself outmaneuvered. Koss was the best money could buy, but Jake wasn't fighting for money. He was protecting his home, his community, everything he'd built over 8 years. The end came suddenly. Koss, frustrated by Jake's impossible shots, made the mistake of shifting positions without proper cover. Jake's round found him with surgical precision, non-lethal but definitive. "You know what your biggest mistake was?" Jake asked, emerging from cover as federal helicopters appeared on the horizon. "Enlighten me," Vale spat, knowing his last hope was gone. "Thinking that hunting is about killing. It's not. It's about protecting what matters. That's why you'll never understand how I beat your perfect plan." The morning sun revealed the full devastation of Vale's operation. But as Sheriff Cooper's trucks arrived with neighbors ready to help rebuild, Jake knew the real victory wasn't in the battle. It was in having something worth fighting for. Federal agents swarmed the farm as Vale made his final desperate move. Despite his wounded arm, he lunged for a fallen contractor's weapon, showing the skill that had made him a legend in special forces. "You think this ends here?" he snarled, backing toward the thermobaric weapons. "One explosion takes everything. Your farm, your evidence, your precious neighbors, all gone in an instant." Jake kept his rifle trained on Vale's position, but didn't fire. After 15 years of special operations and 8 years of farming, he'd learned that some battles aren't won with bullets. "Look around you, Marcus," he said quietly. "Really look. Your corporate backers have abandoned you. Your elite teams are down. Even your perfect sniper couldn't beat a simple farmer. Because you're not a farmer." Vale's composure cracked completely. "You're a ghost who's been haunting me for 8 years. Everything I built, every operation I planned, always wondering if you were watching, waiting." "I was." Jake moved carefully, controlling the distance, just like you were always watching me. "We've been hunting each other since Kandahar, haven't we?" Vale's laugh carried real pain. "My brother died believing he was a hero, fighting for freedom, for justice. But you knew the truth, didn't you? Knew we were just mercenaries playing at being warriors. Your brother made his choice, just like you're making yours now." Vale's finger tightened on his weapon's trigger. "One shot sets off the thermobaric devices. Everything burns. Maybe I die too, but I take your precious home with me." "That's the difference between us," Jake replied calmly. "You see a weapon. I see my son's future, my neighbors' livelihoods, everything I've spent 8 years building. Always the noble warrior." Vale's sneer couldn't hide his desperation. "But I know you, Ghost. Know the killer behind that farmer. Facade. How many confirmed kills? How many lives ended looking through that scope? 342, Jake answered honestly. Everyone authorized, everyone necessary. But you're right, I am a killer. The best at what I did. That's why you should understand what happens next. Vale's eyes widened as he realized his final mistake. He'd been so focused on Jake, he hadn't noticed the shifting shadows around him. Every piece of farm equipment, every supposedly damaged structure concealed automated defense systems that had been repositioning during their conversation. 8 years, Jake continued. 8 years of planning, preparing, waiting, because I knew someone like you would come. Someone who'd threaten not just me, but everything and everyone I care about. Do it then, Vale challenged. Prove you're still the killer I remember. That's your last mistake, Marcus, thinking this was ever about killing. Jake's shot was perfect, hitting Vale's weapon with surgical precision, disarming him without causing further injury. As federal agents moved in to make the arrest, Vale finally understood. You never wanted to kill me, he realized. This whole time, you were protecting something more important than revenge. My home, Jake confirmed, my community, my son's future, everything you tried to destroy because you forgot what we were really trained to do. And what's that? Protect what matters, no matter the cost. The morning sun revealed the full extent of the battle's devastation. Craters from mortar fire scarred Jake's cornfields, burned out vehicles dotted the landscape, and shell casings littered the ground. But something else was emerging from the chaos, the true strength of rural community. Neighbors arrived in pickup trucks loaded with supplies. Farmers brought equipment to help clear the debris. Their wives set up a makeshift kitchen, feeding federal agents and local law enforcement alike. What Vale had tried to destroy, he'd actually made stronger. Found something interesting in the evidence, Sheriff Cooper said, joining Jake as he surveyed the damage. Vale's team had surveillance photos going back 3 years. They've been watching you, studying every move. I know, Jake replied, just like I've been watching them. 8 years of planning, both sides waiting for the other to make a move. His satellite phone buzzed. Matt was safe, already heading back with his SEAL team escort. His son's text was typical teenage brevity. Dad, that was seriously cool, but next time maybe tell me we're living on a tactical training ground? Federal agents were processing Vale's captured teams, documenting evidence of international conspiracies and weapons deals. The thermobaric devices had been secured, their terrible potential neutralized. But the real story was spreading through international media, how one retired sniper had stopped a multinational weapons operation. Your corporate backers scattered like rats, Jake told Vale, as federal marshals prepared him for transport. All that planning, all those resources, undone because you forgot the most important lesson from our training. And what's that? Vale asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Real strength isn't about how many weapons you have or how many men you command. It's about having something worth protecting. Vale studied the community working together to rebuild, understanding finally dawning in his eyes. You really did become a farmer, he said quietly, not just as cover, but because you found something worth defending. Something you could have had too, if you'd chosen differently after Kandahar. Jake's neighbors had already started repairs, their tractors clearing debris alongside federal equipment. Children helped gather spent shell casings, while their parents planned reconstruction efforts. What Vale had seen as weakness, simple rural life, had proven stronger than all his mercenary forces. Your son's lucky, Vale said as they led him. Away. He got to see what his father really fights for. No, Jake corrected. He got to see what a community fights for, together. The sun climbed higher as Jake walked his property, noting repairs needed, planning reconstruction. His fields would need replanting, his equipment replacing. But as he watched his neighbors working together, he knew Vale's attack had failed in the most important way. It hadn't broken them, it had made them stronger. "You'll rebuild," Sheriff Cooper assured him, watching federal helicopters departing with their prisoners. "Whole town's behind you now." Jake nodded, spotting Matt's truck approaching in the distance. That's what Vale never understood. He saw this land as just another battlefield. But it's not about the farm, it's about the people who call it home. 1 week after the battle, international news was still uncovering the scope of Vale's operation. 6 defense contractors under investigation, 3 governments facing corruption charges, and dozens of private military companies exposed. The weapons shipment had been just one part of a massive conspiracy to destabilize regions for profit. Jake's satellite phone hadn't stopped buzzing with messages from his old team. They'd traced the operation's financial backing to the highest levels of corporate and government power. Evidence was being leaked systematically, destroying the networks that had enabled Vale's schemes. "Dad?" Matt asked, helping clear debris from their barn. "All those years of training me to observe, to think tactically. You were preparing me, weren't you?" Jake paused in his work, studying his son. The boy had his mother's intelligence and his father's instincts. "I was preparing you to protect what matters, just like my father taught me, just like his father taught him." The bank had withdrawn their foreclosure threat. Jake's actions had saved them millions in potential liability from the weapons being moved through their county. More importantly, the community had rallied around one of their own. Local farmers pooled resources to help with repairs, refusing to let one of their neighbors lose his land. Sheriff Cooper arrived with news from the federal investigation. Vale's talking, giving up names, locations, entire networks. His corporate backers are falling like dominoes. "And his team?" Jake asked, thinking of Kos and the other professional contractors. "Most are cooperating. Seems watching you defend your home made quite an impression. Even the Russian snipers, providing intelligence about similar operations worldwide." The afternoon sun cast long shadows as Jake surveyed his damaged fields. The corn was mostly destroyed, but the soil underneath remained fertile. Next season would bring new growth, stronger for having been tested. His neighbors had refused to submit expense reports for their help with repairs. "That's not how we do things here," old Johnson had said, his tractor already pulling debris from Jake's fields. "Community takes care of its own." Matt had shown surprising leadership, organizing local teenagers to help with cleanup efforts. They worked alongside federal agents and law enforcement, learning that true strength comes from serving something larger than yourself. "Found something interesting in Vale's personal effects," Cooper mentioned, watching the community work together. Journal entries going back 8 years. He wasn't just hunting you, he was studying you, trying to understand how you found peace after Kandahar while he couldn't. Jake thought about Vale, about the different paths they'd chosen after that. Bloody night in Afghanistan. He never understood that putting down the rifle doesn't make you weak. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought without weapons. As evening approached, Jake watched his son working alongside their neighbors, proud of the man he was becoming. Vale had seen this land as just terrain to be conquered. He'd never understood that true victory isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about building something worth protecting. 1 month after Vale's attack, Jake's farm showed signs of renewal. The community had worked tirelessly to repair the damage, turning destruction into opportunity. New irrigation systems replaced the ones destroyed in battle. Modern equipment, donated by grateful banks and corporations, stood ready for the next planting season. Matt sat on their porch, cleaning his hunting rifle with the precise movements Jake had taught him. "You know what I realized, Dad? All those hunting trips, teaching me to read wind and weather, to track movement through the corn, you were passing on more than just farming skills." "Every generation has its own battles to fight," Jake replied, watching the sunset paint their new fields golden. "My father taught me to protect what matters. I taught you the same." His satellite phone had finally gone quiet. Vale's network had been completely dismantled, his corporate backers facing international prosecution. The weapons they'd tried to smuggle through farm country had been exposed, preventing 3 wars before they could start. Sheriff Cooper's patrol car pulled up, bringing the latest news. "Koss asked to speak with you. Says he's been thinking about what you said, about the difference between hunting and protecting." The Russian sniper had provided invaluable intelligence, helping authorities prevent similar operations worldwide. Like many of Vale's contractors, he'd found a new purpose. After witnessing how one community stood together against overwhelming odds. "Sometimes the best way to defeat your enemies," Jake told his son, "is to show them a better way to live." The evening breeze carried the smell of fresh-turned earth. Local farmers had helped replant Jake's fields, refusing payment. Investment. In community security, old Johnson had called it with a knowing wink. They'd all seen what one trained defender could do. More importantly, they'd discovered their own strength when united. Matt had been accepted to college, agricultural studies with a minor in security consulting. His application essay about community defense had drawn interest from multiple schools. Jake suspected his son would find his own way to balance protection with growth. "You ever miss it?" Matt asked suddenly. "The excitement, the action, being one of the world's best snipers?" Jake considered the question, watching their neighbors' trucks heading home after another day of shared labor. Vale had asked him something similar before federal marshals took him away. The answer was the same. "Found something better," he replied. "Growing things instead of destroying them. Building community instead of tearing it apart. Some battles are won with bullets, but the important ones are won with bonds between people." His hidden arsenal remained secure beneath the barn, maintained but hopefully never needed again. The automated defenses were repaired, disguised once more as farming equipment. But Jake had added something new: training programs for local law enforcement, teaching them to protect their community more effectively. The last light faded as father and son sat together, watching stars emerge above their fields. Vale had seen this land as just another battlefield. He'd never understood that true strength grows from roots sunk deep in fertile soil, nurtured by people who choose to stand together. "You know what real victory is, son?" Jake asked, thinking of Vale's failed operation and the stronger community that emerged from its ashes. "What's that, Dad?" "Having something worth fighting for. Something worth protecting. Something that grows stronger with each season, no matter what storms come. Above them, stars wheeled in ancient patterns as a new crop grew silently in darkness. The earth remained fertile, ready for whatever the next season might bring, and in the end, that was the greatest victory of all.